Givens, upper right, his mother in Puerto Plata, when he was just not even a toddler, didn't want him because she said he was ugly. And that's the truth. So she took him to the hospital and left him.
We have a guest, a longtime friend of mine, a fellow elder that served with me many years. He and his wife have taken up a mission of running a children's home in the Dominican Republic. Paul Wirt and Barbara Wirt are co-directors of the children's home. And Paul and Barbara and the work of the children's home are a vested interest in a daily occurrence here in this congregation, where we are not only providing prayers, encouragement, contacts, and some financial assistance. The big deal here is that Paul and Barbara are the co-directors housed in Fairfax, Virginia. They spent several years on the turf in Bobita, Dominican Republic. And by the way, Paul will tell you, this is not Punta Cana resort. And Brent Bird will tell you, it's also a long way from civilization. I can attest, because I've lived there too during 2 summers with college groups that we brought in, and I was actually leading the college kids. It's 3 hours from the nearest airport, and you're not fully aware that electricity is going to be on from day to day, or much less the water will work. If you want to ask firsthand experience, you can talk to Patty Bass or Valerie Ward about this situation. They'll tell you how it works. Through all that, there's this wonderful children's home, and Paul's going to tell us about it, what's going on there, what's happened, and what he's praying about will happen. He's going to talk to you about the staff. He's going to talk to you about challenges. He's going to talk to you about opportunities. And without further ado, let's welcome Paul Wirt.
Thanks, Jack. First of all, is my voice coming through? I'm getting over a cold, so my apology. I have cough drops here. I've got Kleenex, and I have a bottle of water. No
COVID.
No COVID. I took a COVID test. On Sunday, I was up in Ocala at Maricamp, talking with them. They're actually the longest running church with the children's home. They've supported the children's home over 20 years. But I had a bottle of water on the, I'll call it pulpit, and I had my Starbucks cup. And I told them I felt like a football coach after a game. You know how they always have the Gatorade? But anyway, thank you. As Shaq said, I'm Paul Wirt. The better half of the Paul Wirt and Barbara Wirt team is not here. The first week of the month is a busy time for my wife, the smart accountant, and she works for another nonprofit, a trade association. So she's busy up in Fairfax. Our story is, I worked 35 years for the Department of Defense. We moved from St. Louis to Fairfax in 1990. We were always involved with the youth group, but we got involved with missions late in the 1990s, early 2000s. We started being chaperones to Bobita in 2002 with those short-term missions. So between us, we led more than 14 groups, teens and adults. And as I was preparing for retirement in 2012, we approached Manna and said, we'd love to come to Bobita and do something. And so they said, we need help at the children's home. So Barbara and I lived in Bobita from 2013 to 2018. And then we'd only signed up for 2 years, but stayed for 5. And it's hard work there, right, Brent? He was with a team from Jeffersonville, Northside Church of Christ, who did a lot of work on the children's home compound several years ago. So that's the word story. I do want to mention the Shacks are very special. Cindy more so than Shack. But we've known them many years, so many years that Shack and I both had hair at the time. Okay, I'm not used to live streams, so I apologize to the people out there. I'm not nervous, am I? Okay, so this is important. As I really get into this, I want you to feel free to stop me, raise your hand. If I don't see you, yell, "Hey, Paul," and I'll take any questions. If I'm about ready to address something you're asking, I'll let you know. But don't hesitate to stop me. I'm sharing this story of the children's home. I did it 2 years ago when we were last here. It's not only about the children's home, but it's about your church, your family, all of North Tampa, and your involvement. So I'm going to get started. Also, I think I have control of the slides, which is a scary thought. Okay, so we wanted to give you an overview of manna, just really quickly. Of course, in the upper left hand, you see the Manna Children's Home. And that's really what I'm here to talk with you about, and that's what your church does. They support the children's home. Go to the right. Another important part of our Manna Global Missions is groups. Groups are very important. During COVID, we were severely impacted. For over 2 years, we had no groups. And that's important at several levels. One, there's an overhead to having groups come in, so it brings in some money to Manna. But also, the interaction, especially for our children's home kids, they love groups. So groups is very important, and we'll do a little bit of that on the next slide. Lower left, the Manna Christian School, that's 10th grade through 12th grade. And that's a mixture of kids from Rio San Juan, the nearest, I'll call it large city. There's probably about 18,000 people. And the children in Bobita and Caracania, and specifically our children's home kids. For the people in Bobita and Caracania, whether they're on the children's home compound or not, they go to a local Dominican primary school, which is now K through 9. So the high school is 3 grades. And then we have what we're still calling the Santiago College Ministry. It's gone under different names. There's not a lot of students under that program, but it's an important aspect of what Manna does. From the children's home perspective, we look at it a little different, and I'll cover that later too. But anyway, that's the 4 areas right now. In the past, you would have known we did something in Rio San Juan. Right now, that program is, I'll say, non-existent. It's certainly being looked at for the future again. Okay. Ooh, it worked. Okay. This is all about North Tampa. It's just a selection of slides that I was able to get from Shack. It's a variety of you doing all this preparation for Magi, preparing boxes, shipping boxes. You also had that large, I think those boxes may be the Bibles in the lower left. You shipped over many Spanish Bibles. And then at that time, Shaka Claus was going to Bobita in December with the Magi, and that's a photo of him with a lot of the kids. So now we go to actual groups. I just threw these all together. I don't know which trips or whether they were the fact-finding trip, but the one I like the best is on the far right up top, and that would be Neil. It was great to have him come and see Bobita and get exposure to Manna as a whole, but especially for the kids in the children's home. Lower left, there's always a beach day for groups, and I believe that is your group. And most importantly, dead center was one of your people was baptized there. What was his name? Nathan Baker. Very good. So this is what I'm kind of showing you here is the dual impact of groups, because you see Nathan was impacted by his surroundings and certainly by the people of your group who you sent, and his heart was touched and he chose to be baptized. Also, the impact on the kids is great. I just can't stress that enough. Groups is very important, and I would tell you right now, if North Tampa a year from now wants to get a group together, it could be a teen group, it could be a mixed adult teen group, it could be singles, we would love to have you all come. From the children's home perspective, you probably get about a day and a half, if not 2 days, really over the week, focused on our kids at the children's home. It's just a great thing. Okay, because I can't see that far. I know I'm not supposed to turn around, but I'm going to do it quick. Okay, we have 11 children who we would absolutely say these are the children who live and need to be in the children's home. So right now there's 11, there's 6 boys, 5 girls, and I'll have their pictures up in a minute or so. We are a foster care facility. Most kids that come to us, they stay with us till they're 18, in some cases beyond, and I'll explain that. But we are not an adoption facility at all. Okay? We want them to stay Dominican. We want them to stay in the Dominican Republic. It's good for their training as they're growing up. What they'll do as adults is what we're looking for the Dominicans. We do have an additional 6 children. Most of them are children of staff, and I'll explain that. The difference is our children at the children's home, we have decided, Barb and I did this probably 8 years ago. Originally, when we moved there were only 2 sponsors per child. We grew it to 4 sponsors per child. Okay? But for the staff children, we only have 1 sponsorship, and that's to help with some basic things like their school uniform, birthday parties, things like that, because they have their parents, and their parents have income. So we're just assisting. We also continue to support 5 college students, and I will address that one kind of heavily. So when we talk about sponsorship, we say $50 a month, and that's $600 a year, and that's just the way we set it up. Right now, we are sitting very pretty. I think we are almost completely covered in individual sponsorships. And what I mean by that, when you're sponsoring a child, it's that more intimate relationship. If you happen to go there with a group, you can say, oh, here's my child, At Christmas, Barb and I, for the last 5 years, we take 6 suitcases every Christmas with sponsors' gifts that they've bought for their kids. So that's that. And then we do have 4 churches that support the Manna Children's Home. And of course, you all, I love to say, yay, North Tampa. You're very important. We have Camp, we have North Tampa, and we have our church, Fairfax. And then not a set budget all the time, but every 3 to 4 months we get a good chunk of money for the children's home from Cloverdale Church of Christ in Searcy, Arkansas. So we consider that our 4 churches. And the way we look at that, when we talk about churches' money, we just generally look at it as running the children's home, buying the groceries, maintenance on the truck, salaries. Whereas when we talk with individual sponsors, we say, here's the benefit to your child. Okay, let's meet the kids. And if any of you were here 2 years ago, they've grown up. So I think I can do this one looking forward. The two top girls, Josneri on the left and Josmary on the right, they are sisters. In our vernacular, we would say half-sisters. But over there, they're just sisters. Josneri on the left was 3 when she moved to the children's home, and her older sister, Josmary, was 6. Barb and I had been there just over 5 months when we got a call from Konani. Konani is like their Child Protective Services. And they said, we have 2 young girls who are in need, maybe in danger. And we took them, and they have been there ever since. So we go down. On the far left is Suleika, and on the far right is her older sister, Mackenzia. And they have 2 brothers who you'll see on the next slide. It's kind of a funny story. The 4 of them came to us the second week of January in the year 2017. Porfi, who you'll meet Porfi, he's the Costa Rican missionary along with his wife Carla. He has a very good relationship with Konani. Konani called him about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and said, we have 4 children in danger. We've got to get them to you. Would you be willing to take them? And of course, Porfi ran up the hill to the 2 Americans and said, that's what they need. What do you want to do? And we said, do they really need to come right away? Because we're used to red tape. And we said, okay, we need to pray about this, and we need to call Shaq, because Shaq, he didn't mention that, but he is kind of over Barbara and I within the MANA organization. He's our yes man, just saying. But anyway, we went to Shaq and said, here's our situation. He goes, you know what? Between you 2 and Porfi and Carla, make the decision. And so we prayed about it. We talked some more. It only took us about an hour. And we said, okay, Porfi, excuse me, tell Konani that we'll take them. But we need to know, when do they think they would bring them? So Porfi goes down the hill, gets on his phone, calls Konani. He comes up about 5 minutes later, and he says, I think they were down at the corner where La Cantera, that's where you turn off the highway and you start the 5-mile trek up the mountain. And literally 30 minutes later, the 4 kids came up in a little Konani car. And they've been with us ever since. So that was a long story, but it's kind of interesting. How the Dominicans can move really slow in almost everything. And then out of the blue, you've got 4 kids 30 minutes later. It was amazing. I will say that morning, I guess it's how God works. Barbara and I were just sitting there talking about how, oh my gosh, we're down to like 7 kids. Are we supposed to close this over time? What's God want us to do? That afternoon, we added 4 kids. So he has a sense of humor, I guess. Okay. Lower center is Jessica. Her story's fun. I'll do this real quick. We knew Jessica for years before she was ever part of MANA. She lived in Rio San Juan, and all the American tourists, German tourists, French tourists, they all knew her because her and her 2 cousins were known as the popcorn girls. They'd come home from school at the aunt's house. She lived at her aunt's house, and they would pop up popcorn, bag it, and then their job for 2 hours each evening was to go around to the tourist restaurants and sell popcorn to raise some money for the family. So Jessica is, I'm not talking a lot about the parents, but I will mention that Jessica's aunt, very nice woman, has very little money, and the money she has really was spent more on her two daughters. Jessica wasn't a Cinderella story, but it had touches of it. About 8 years ago, the tensions between Haiti and the DR, they're always there, but they were worse that year. They were talking about deporting any Haitian that had no paperwork, and Jessica would have fit that model. So she called Porfi. Porfi called Konani. Konani told us, you need to coordinate this with the aunt and have her sign off. Jessica does have a father who lives about 2 hours away, and we had to coordinate with him. And the next day, Jessica was at the children's home, and she's been an amazing addition. She's a senior this year. They're small classes. There are probably only 7 or 8 kids in the senior class, but I guarantee she will be magna cum laude if they had it. She is highly intelligent. Doesn't make her better than the other kids, but it's just an attribute that she has. Any questions before I go on? Because I'm just running through here. Okay, now the boys. Okay, I mentioned the 2 sisters, Suleika and Mackenzie. If you look on the left, the 2 boys on top, Giorgino, and below, Salvador, they're the 2 brothers. I will say, of those 4 kids, they share the same mother, but there are 3 different fathers. So it's just the way it is. I'm not throwing spears at this. It's just the way it is. I will say the mother decided to leave the country. And in 2017, that's the bad situation they were put into. She left them with a man who was not any of their father. So it was really bad. And thankfully, Mackenzie, the oldest, went to her principal, who called the police, who then they called Konani, and Konani called us, and that's how they got to the children's home. And all 4 kids are wonderful. Salvador, definitely the lower one, has anger issues, and we'll talk about our psychologist in a few minutes. Giorgino just loves everybody, which could have its own problems, but he's a sweet little kid. Okay, I'll try to move quicker. Enger is the one we know the most. He was 2, about to go on 3, when Barb and I moved there. And he's just a sweet kid. His mom lives in Santiago. She was 15 when she had him, and she had 3 brothers who were at the children's home for a while, and she knew of Porfi and Carla. She called Porfi and said, I have a newborn, I can't take care of him. So Porfi and Carla drove over and got him. We now only take kids through Konani. They've become very professional, and we try to do things by the books, and that's the way it should be. But Enger, the guy, to his, in the upper right, Givens, in the lower right, Christo, all came to us before there was any kind of Konani involvement. Lower middle is Christian. He came to us in about 2015. I'll go back to Givens, upper right. His mother in Puerto Plata, when he was just not even a toddler, didn't want him because she said he was ugly. And that's the truth. So she took him to the hospital and left him. And the reason we got him was 6 months prior to that, Christo, the one on the lower right, who had come from the same village, his mother had died, and he was malnourished. And through a series of connections, Manna was able to take each of those boys. And it's been a blessing ever since. They're great kids. All our kids are great. Take it from me. Okay. So these are the other 6 that I said we just have a single sponsorship with. So to walk through them, of course I do the staff last, and I should have done them before these kids. But Sarlin is the daughter of Jacqueline, and Jacqueline helps Porphy and Carla run the children's home. Jacqueline, her mother was originally the Boys House mom. When we left in 2018, we in the Cordobas, Porphy and Carla, promoted her to help them run the children's home. So she has since had now a 3-year-old going on 4, and that's Sarlin. The two girls to the right, Naomi and Sayeri, they are the daughters of Hiro, who you'll see, our maintenance man. Lower left is Daniel. Actually, when he was 6 months old, he lived at the children's home. His mom was a house mother at that time. Ada still works for us 50% of the time as an emergency relief house mom, and the other 50% she works at Manna Christian School in the kitchen. So Daniel has one sponsor. And then in the middle, Danny, and to the right, excuse me, Abby. They are actually the children of Porphy and Carla. And we'll hear more about them in a minute. Okay, so that's the 6 extra kids with some coverage. All right. I still, as much as I love all our kids, I love talking about the college kids. So we'll do Abby real quick. She's on the upper left. She's the older of the 2 children of Porphy and Carla. She graduated a year ago, and she is going to an art school. It's actually quite well known in the Dominican Republic. It's called ANI. It's actually, I think, American-owned. And she's an art student. Below her, Jolinette is actually the older daughter of Jacqueline, the one who had the little Sarlin, the 3-year-old. Well, that's her first daughter, Jolinette, who graduated from Manna Christian about 3 years ago, and she is striving for a nursing degree in Nagua, which is a city east and north of us. Go to the far right upper, that's Ariel. He, I believe in June, is going to graduate with 4 years, and the schooling they call it is technology. We'd call it computer science. He's big into telecommunications. He's trying to form his own company to get ready for after he finishes school, which is wonderful because then we don't need to find any money for him if he's self-supporting, which would be wonderful. And then lower right, Woodson, who's been at the children's home for about, he was at the children's home for about 16 years. He is part of the Santiago Christian student program, somewhat in name only because just some of the way we set it up, he's being supported through the children's home. But he is in tourism, which is a great major if he can graduate. He's struggling. He's got to get through business accounting. It keeps knocking him down. So he's in his 3rd iteration of business accounting. Yes, sir?
Was Whitson the one that needed eye surgery years ago?
He did. He had, I'll call it an extreme allergy to the waters in the rivers. They would irritate, and it was, I'm going to say fungal. I don't know exactly what it was, but he had to do this series of treatments. We'd have to drive him to Santo Domingo. They would extract blood from his arm, and they'd put it in a mixture and make like eye drops, and he would use them for 30 days to help him with his vision, and he's grown out of it. So that's a good thing. With him is his girlfriend, Lucia, who is just a wonderful young woman. We met. She's in Santiago, and she is absolutely in the college program, and she's from a city called Harapakoa. And we are hoping that they will continue dating and one day get married, because they are both just perfect for each other. I don't need to be the dad here. I'll go on. So I can't forget Rosemary, dead center. That's our doctor. She was driven at the age of 8. By the age of 10 or 11, she knew she wanted to be a doctor. And of course, everybody was like, yeah, Rosemary. And she was older and graduated ahead of when we ever had a Manna Christian school. So she went to Rio San Juan High School, and she actually graduated from that large high school summa cum laude. I guess that's the second place. Anyway, she set up that she was going to Gaspar Hernandez and do the first 2 years of college. When Barb and I moved there, after 6 months, we had to find her a place. There was no college ministry yet, so the children's home raised the money. We had 2 wonderful sponsors who wanted to sponsor her, and we found an apartment for her. Barb is the accountant. She had Rosemary develop a budget. She has to stand by that budget, just like Barb's husband Paul does. If she's watching online, I'm sorry, Barb. So anyway, Rosemary is a success story. She graduated. She finished a 1-year internship a year ago. Then she was supposed to do a 1-year residency, and she put in extra hours all through the residency that she finished in like 8.5 or 9 months. She is so driven, whether it's studying or whether it's work, she's focused. Now, the downside of that is sometimes she has to work on her interpersonal skills, because she is so focused. Well, that's what I'm going to do. She just looks you in the face and go, yeah, now what's next? But she's special. So all the kids I've just shown you, from the littlest to the oldest, Barb and I think of as our grandkids. So even though we moved back in 2018, we've stayed involved. We go every June and every December, and we only missed one of those during COVID. We did 3 of the 4 during COVID, masking up. But the airplanes were empty. It was a great time to fly. Anyway, but those kids missed 2 years of people like you coming to Bobita. They really did. Okay, let's see what's next. Oh, the staff. Let me go through this. Porfi and Carla, indispensable. He is from Costa Rica. He met Carla in Honduras. They got married, so we say they're both from Costa Rica. But she'll tell you Hondurans know how to cook, and she does cook very well. They have been at the children's home now they've been in the Dominican Republic 13 years, and I think just over 12 years. After they got there, very quickly they were asked to come to the children's home versus Rio San Juan. So they've raised the 2 kids there. Danny was just a little toddler when they moved there. They will probably be preparing for retirement. So I'm looking for Spanish speakers that want to run a children's home now. Probably in 3 to 5 years. That would be my guess. Maybe longer. We'll see. Okay, Jacqueline I talked about. She has the 2 daughters. She's on the left. We call her the children's home ops director. She assists Porfi and Carla. In the middle is Rosa Ariz. She is the girls' house mom, and she's perfect for the girls. She'd be perfect for the boys too, but she's perfect for the girls. She gives them the attention, positive attention that I think they need, and she doesn't hesitate to give them direction, if you know what I mean. I just found out today that Rosa Elena has given her 4 weeks notice, so she's leaving at the end of February. Her and her sister, who's pictured later, who's a replacement house mom, have a very ailing mother, I believe. My Spanish isn't great, but I think it's their mom. So they have chosen to move on. And Porfy today said that they actually have a line on a new house mom. And they'll have to vet her and all that. Okay. I'm going to start in the lower right. That's Yolanda. She's the sister. So she'll probably be moving on. She's just she is a replacement house mom. They're indispensable. They work 4 days a week, and each house mom gets 2 of those days off, if that makes sense. When we moved there, each house mom had 12 hours off. They'd get up on a Thursday or a Friday morning. They'd have to find a ride down to the road to get them to Rio San Juan. They'd have probably about 8 hours at home to probably wash the clothes and dust their house. They'd turn around and come back to work for another 6 days. It was very hard for them. And Barb looked at me one day and she said, they're going to 5 days a week, and we're going to find a way to do it. So she looked at me, go raise money, Paul. So that's what I did. But anyway, Barb is the big thinker. She is something else. Okay. Lower left is Ada. She's the one who many years ago was a house mom and now works for us 50% of the time. Upper right is Jairo, our maintenance guy. Excellent. He's always there. He's always willing to work, and he'll do whatever. There he is showing off the new weed whacker we got him. I had to go out and raise money for that. Okay, and then I saved, maybe not the best, but a very impactful one for last. Our child psychologist, Grayley, we found her 3 years ago. She works for us just 2 hours every Friday. She comes from Gaspar Hernandez. She focuses on all our kids, but she certainly has a focus on, I mentioned Salvador has anger issues, and a couple other kids have some specific issues that she works with them on. That's wonderful. She's helped Porfy and Carla because of her interaction with Konani and being a psychologist. She knows how to organize the paperwork, which is excellent. It's needed. But the best of all is she loves to come out whenever the kids have a birthday party. So she brings the cake from Gaspar Hernandez, and it's not homemade, but definitely bakery made, good quality, and the children's home pays for it, but she comes out, brings the plates, the napkins, makes banners. She is not just a good psychologist, but her interpersonal skills with our children is amazing. So that's a good thing. Okay, I'm getting the high sign. The reality of having a children's home is maintenance. I know this is boring, this isn't about the kids, but it's essential. So, very quickly, upper left, just for the fun of it, the boys that day were getting new plastic chairs for their kitchen, dining room. Boys are a little tough on plastic chairs, so about 2 to 1 over the girls, we have to replace them. And Porfy's like, they always break them. And we're like, Porfy, 1, they're boys. 2, they're plastic. 3, go buy them. So, and then Barb says, okay, Paul, get the money. I did 2 shots of a new door. I think it's actually the same door. One's closed and one's open. But we did front and back doors in the girls' house and the boys' house for improved security. They were wooden plank doors. Our old house, which you can see if you look at the cistern on the right-hand side, the house above it, that's where Barb and I lived for 5 years, and that's now where Jacqueline lives. That house in Porfy and Carla's had metal doors, but it was the kids' houses that needed them. So we found money and did that. The cistern was hugely important. A church in north of Fort Worth, Lake City's Church of Christ, gave us the $3,000. It ended up costing $2,970. That more than doubled our water storage capability. So the pump from the well pumps there, and then from there it has its own pump up to the black tanks that were above our house, and then from there everything's gravity fed to the 4 homes. So a little bit of engineering. We got new porch roofs. Metal there tends to rust. The 2 porches, their roofs were probably 14 to 16 years old, in pretty bad shape. The hurricane, I think it was Hurricane Ian, took the carport roof off, and that's the 2 lower rights. You see them building new parts of it, and under it, once it was completed, you see our, it's a Colorado, I can't remember what company it is, Chevy Colorado. Looks brand new. It's probably about 8 years old. The reason I showed this one is the most expensive bit of maintenance we have every year is that truck, and it's because of the Bobita Road. It's because of driving to Santiago and that terrible road. The roads are terrible there. So we're always replacing tires, shocks, struts, you name it. But Porfy takes meticulous care of that truck, and it's a wonderful thing. But that's a big expense. Okay. A one-time even bigger expense, the basketball court. That is now almost 20 years old, and you can't really see it, but that cement that they're on, and some of them are barefoot on, that's almost like gravel. It's totally degrading, and we want to totally tear it down, bring it back up by a professional. I had raised $6,000 for it, and it is a minimum of $12,000. So we haven't raised that money yet. And I'm just mentioning that to you. Okay. I'm an old cartographer for the government, so everything's about imagery and maps. So that's the way I got to finish the formal part of this. Ignore the house that's in that circle. That just means it's not part of our property. The biggest rectangle, that's the basketball court. Next to it is they call it a kiosk. We call it a gazebo in the corner. To the left of that is our house. That's the original house on the compound. Then the 3 lower ones, if you look, the middle one is actually 2-story, and that's where Porfy and Carla live on the first floor, and the second floor is administration, classroom, movie night, things like that for the kids. The lower right is the boys' house, lower left is the girls' house. In the very bottom, you see a bunch of little white rectangles. Porfy has gone into beekeeping and selling honey, and he's actually trying to also help himself prepare for retirement one day. His hope would be he'd purchase property in Costa Rica, and he would raise bees and sell honey there too. Okay. This is a map. So if you know the island of Hispaniola, you know that on the far left, not pictured, is Haiti. And on the right is the Dominican Republic. At the top you see Bobita, and we kind of blew it out. It's in the middle of the Campo, which is farming country. And it's a great place to raise the kids because they're very safe and secure, but it also comes with a lot of problems in that you're not near any of the big cities. So the monthly shopping is to the left. It's called Santiago. That's 2.5 hours away, 48 miles. And then Rio San Juan was just further up the coast from Bobita in the inset, and that's where they do the weekly vegetable buy. So they get fresh vegetables every week. So I think that's it. Yes. I want to say, because this is important for you to hear, the children at the children's home are safe. Does it guarantee perfection? No. Does it guarantee they won't be hurt? No. But as unindustrial as you can make a house where you got 6 boys and a house mom who's not their mom, or 5 girls and a house mom who's not their mom, it is the closest thing to a functioning home, I believe, that they could have. And in some cases, it's better than what they did have. It's not to say that parents were terrible. Life gets in the way, and it got in their way. But our kids are loved, protected, fed. We also work on their spirituality. The boys are always behind the girls. Isn't that kind of like here in the U.S.? Usually girls. So Mackenzie's been baptized. Jessica, Abby. And Porphy is trying to spend some time focusing on the boys separately to try to help them. We don't want them to falsely do that. We want them to feel the desire to grow closer to God. And I think that's an important thing of what we do. And they provide that. And I'll tell you, groups coming really foot stomps that. Those kids watch the Americans as they come in and they see things. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and I really would love to answer questions. And if you don't have any, I know Shaq's going to hit me with some.
Anyone have any questions, please?
Yes, sir.
Let me get a mic to you there, buddy.
Oh, sounds like it's working.
Explain a partial sponsorship. What does that entail?
Okay. When we talk sponsorship, Barb and I think of an individual paying $50 a month. It's just a number we set. When we moved there, it was 2 sponsors per child, and it was $45 each, $90. And those children, and there was only 2 sponsoring churches. There was not a lot of money. In Manna, the way they set it up is each ministry is responsible for their own fundraising. To be honest, Porphy and Carla don't know how to fundraise. They're Costa Rican. Any of their contacts don't have a lot of money in Costa Rica, and they don't know how to ask Americans. So Barb and I came in, and I talk too much if you can't tell. I would take every group, every chaperone on a tour of the children's home and try to get a contact with them. So a partial sponsorship, you could think of that. The way we have it set up right now, there's 4 sponsors per child, or $200 a month per child. Now, also when I was talking about partial sponsorships, there were those 6 additional people where we just do 1 sponsor per, just to help them because their parents earn money. But they're the children of our workers, and we want to try to help their parents offset some of the costs. And we think of them as our kids. So I don't know if that explained it. Okay.
Anyone else? As your partner here, North Tampa, give us a couple of your largest challenges right now where we as your partner can, what are your prayer needs? How can we encourage you? How can we make connectivity that goes deeper to build relationships?
There's several answers to that. Together, they probably don't each connect to the other. One, I would say, I would tell this to any church. If you could get a group together and go and invest time there, that's huge. It's just, and I know it's short term for a church, but it is long term for the children you impact. Maintenance is a struggle. You know, we have trouble with the truck, and it impacts the funding for the children's home. We have the need, we believe, strongly believe, that basketball court needs to be brought up to speed. So we have challenges like that I'm not necessarily going to churches and saying, can you fix that? But if there's, I'll say, a high school coach that goes, oh, I could probably give $1,000, I would probably try to I would talk to that person and say, if that's something you really like, if there's someone in the medical profession who would like to help Rosemary, she is still underfunded. She still has some more work to do, even though she is about to become a Dominican doctor. She's wanting to do further studies that would help her achieve something that could be used both in the United States and the Dominican Republic, whether she eventually went to the U.S. and worked, or whether she got the training there and then went back to the DR. So there's all kinds of issues like that. I will say during COVID, our kids at the this is actually a good news story. Our kids at the children's home actually thrived scholastically. And you know why? Because Carla and Jacqueline did the hands-on for those 11 kids 5 days a week. They made sure they did their homework, and they gave them, I'll call it 1 on 11 attention. At the Bobita school, not criticizing it though, you got 90 kids and 7 teachers, and they weren't getting the same attention. So during COVID, our kids, the ones that were, like C level or a little below, actually went to B's and A's. And they're actually staying there now that school's back in session. The impact, though, was they lost a lot of that interpersonal with groups in the U.S. They missed that terribly. Just can't stress it enough.
Great, thank you. Last call, good involved, anybody? Let's give it up for Paul. Thank you for giving us.
Well, thank you for putting up with my cold.